Hey guys, my name's Zach Martin. I'm a member of Alpharetta Methodist Church and actually came to speak to the Amen Ministry a couple months ago and gave my testimony about my background and how I came to faith. And I'm here to talk to you guys today about the bodily resurrection of Jesus. We know that this is the crux of Christianity. And if we can't prove that fact when we're sharing our faith with others or defending it, really the whole foundation and bedrock of what we believe is somewhat unstable. I'm really passionate about this data myself because it's the data that actually brought me to faith. I was one of those skeptics. I was somebody that I had a very difficult time cracking the Bible open and reading it and really spending any time or focusing unless I knew that it was true to begin with and trying to verify that from outside the Bible. And so much so on the facts that I'm going to share with you that again I was baptized about a year ago and that being a big part of how I came to faith. So I wanted to overview the facts with you, some opportunities that I potentially see and how we can share this information and potentially convert some of those skeptics out there, at least plant the seeds and get their wheels turning on the possibilities. So, wanted to jump into first the challenge that we face. So, we know that this is critically important. Jesus in the Great Commission very clearly said, "Go and make disciples of all the nations, teach them to obey everything that I've commanded you." And if we look at some other examples like First Peter, Peter clearly says, "Be prepared to give an answer for your faith and be able to give reason and essentially defend why we believe what we believe." So I wanted to throw a couple quick stats out there. 70%. 70% is the percentage of young adults that are Christians that when they go off to college or their next phase of life in their early 20s, they're going to either permanently leave the faith or take a long hiatus from the faith. And I was shocked when I came across this stat. It's verifiable by a couple of different research firms that the parents, the community can be doing everything right, bringing the children into church, bringing them up into faith, but still the vast majority of them within just a couple years of leaving home are going to leave the faith. And I was one of those kids. So I personally feel a big part of it is that those young adults, and really I just think a lot of Christians in general maybe don't have the firm foundation or like the underlying data for why do we believe what we believe in Christianity, and then being able to defend that when they're asked by others. The second stat is, I'm sure you've heard this, but 5 to 6 billion people in the world that are not Christians today. Obviously, a huge opportunity in our everyday lives and conversations to plant some of those seeds in those skeptics. So I think the opportunity is twofold. One, we need to arm our young adults that are already in the faith with that knowledge for when they inevitably get challenged or asked hard questions about why they believe what they believe. They're not one of those 70% that ends up straying. They're able to defend their faith and also share it with others in a way that may plant seeds or convert those skeptics. And then the second piece is an opportunity to convert that huge number of skeptics out there that are like me that really need that hard data or facts outside the Bible that point to why is all this true? So I'm not going to run through all the common beliefs of the skeptics, but a couple really common ones that I've run into as I was doing my research or just that I've seen everything from Jesus never existed and was not even a person to Christianity is just a copy of other older religions. The folks that are throwing these kinds of objections out there, again, I don't think are the same people that we're going to be able to bring in with just a faith or Bible driven approach. We're going to have to use some kind of outside data to combat that and get their wheels turning. So how do we do that? We have to arm our young adults and our skeptics with the data for the bodily resurrection. That's what we're going to spend the rest of our time here talking about. And so the high level approach, run through it real quick, is one, we need to be able to use cold, hard facts. And really, as much as we can, number two, focus on data outside the Bible where possible. We're going to run through some biblical proof, but also a lot of sources, reliable sources that are outside the Bible that point to all this being true. Three, we have to keep it simple and focused on the resurrection. So as you get into these conversations, there's going to be a tendency for people to push back and start going in every which direction from is God real to what was the start or creation of the universe. And we have to be able to bring it back and focus on the crux of our faith and bring it back to the resurrection. And four, do that pointing to facts that are essentially universally accepted. And we're going to walk through what those are. So this minimal facts approach is what it's called. What are they and what is it? So it was developed by a guy named Dr. Gary Habermas, and very quickly, just he's the go-to person in this space. He's been studying it for over 60 years. His research is a lot of the data that's actually in the famous book, The Case for Christ. Lee Strobel based the book on a lot of Dr. Habermas's research. And the minimal facts approach is really simple. It just has two criteria. One, the data are very strongly evidenced, and two, they're granted by virtually all scholars, even the critical ones, the skeptics. They'll grant these five facts. And so if you can make a compelling argument with a few facts that essentially everybody agrees upon, it's very compelling, again, to the point that it had me converted and I got baptized and was in the faith. So, what are the facts? First, we were going to walk through Jesus existed and died by crucifixion. Second, the tomb was actually empty. Third, and this was a huge one for me, it's two-part. First, that the disciples claimed that Jesus rose and appeared to them after he died on the cross. And the second part is they actually believed it to the point that they were willing to suffer and die on behalf of that belief. The fourth fact is Paul, an enemy, a persecutor of Christians, was suddenly converted, and his martyrdom is well documented. And fifth, James, the brother of Jesus, was not a believer that he was the Son of God before the resurrection, but he was also suddenly converted, and his martyrdom for the faith is well documented too. So we'll give you guys the 10,000 foot overview of each of these facts. So the first one, Jesus existed and died by crucifixion. Obviously, in all four gospels, very consistent stories there, but even outside the Bible, we won't walk through all these, but four very commonly referenced sources that are very reliable, everything from Jewish and Roman historians that were not Christians that document Jesus as a historical figure, that he died by crucifixion, all the way to the Jewish Talmud that says the same. It's very easy to refute that claim that he wasn't a person or didn't die on the cross. It's noted by most as the most verifiable fact in ancient history is this one. The second one is the empty tomb. So we can remember this with an acronym JET, J-E-T. So the first is the Jerusalem factor. It was so close where Christianity spun up to where the actual events of his execution and resurrection occurred that there's no proof that any body was ever provided or exhumed from that tomb. It didn't even have to be Jesus's body. If the authorities of the day would have produced a body out of that tomb, because of the proximity, it would have immediately destroyed the movement itself. The second piece of that is E, enemy attestation. So there's a few sources there, but the crux of this is there's a lot of data saying that people of the day were saying that the body was stolen from the tomb by the disciples. And the important point is if the body was stolen, it implicitly admits that there was no body in the tomb. It was empty. And the third is T, the testimony of women. So again, very well documented that at that time in those cultures, the credibility of women's testimony was really just not there or seen as less than. So if you were making up a story from scratch about Jesus rising from the dead, you would never use women as the ones that went in and found the empty tomb first. It would just add zero credibility to your story. So points back to that the gospel is actually true and they were documenting what actually happened. The third fact, we could spend an hour or two just walking through these, but very, very high level. Again, this one was very important to me that the disciples sincerely believed Jesus rose and appeared to them. So first they claimed it. You can use another acronym POW to remember this one. So first, Paul, throughout his epistles, claims this fact. And there's a lot of sources outside the Bible that show that Paul was in very close proximity to the disciples and the apostles. The second is O, the oral tradition. So creeds like First Corinthians 15 that dates all the way back to 5 years after the crucifixion, very clearly state in creedal format what the early church believed, that Jesus died, rose to the dead, and lists, several audiences that he appeared to, including James, a group of 500, the 12 disciples, etc. On the believe side, the important piece here, and this one was key to me, the important piece here is there's at least seven ancient sources, and I have them listed there, that are very reliable, well documented. They're outside the Bible that document the martyrdom and suffering of the apostles. So from Peter, Paul, James, the brother of Jesus, as well as others, there's very clear documentation on how these guys died, and they've died for believing in their faith in Jesus. And the fact that there's really no proof out there that says that any of them recanted that belief under this suffering and martyrdom. They were in proximity. They were there. You've heard the old term, who would die for a lie. These guys were there in the moment and knew whether that fact was true or not. So that one's just huge to me. Minimal fact number four. So Paul's sudden conversion. We know that Paul was a persecutor of Christians. His conversion is well documented throughout the New Testament. And then his suffering and martyrdom is in Paul and Luke, but also in some of these outside the Bible reliable sources that very clearly state how he died on behalf of the faith. And then similarly, James, the brother of Jesus, his conversion and that Jesus's brothers and siblings were non-believers is very well documented. But then also his martyrdom and some of these sources outside the Bible that are reliable, reputable, very clearly state how James died in great detail on behalf of the faith. So I have two brothers. I'm sure a lot of people here have siblings. What would it take for you to believe that your brother was the Son of God? Probably nothing short of him dying and appearing from the dead directly in front of your eyes. So that's a brief overview of the actual facts. Wanted to get into some common objections and the refutations to those. So we won't go into detail on these, but we'll provide this deck and some other resources for you all. But very high level, there's a lot of objections. There's four really big common ones that you'll run into when talking about this. So one, the disciples stole the body. Second, the hallucination theory that there's mass hallucination going on and people seeing Jesus raised from the dead at that time. The third, the swoon theory that Jesus didn't actually die on the cross, he just fainted. And fourth, the legend theory that the resurrection was just a story that grew over time. I've got the refutations on the right side of the screen, but all these objections, very common, but they're very easily combated or holes poked in them, and they just don't hold up. So how do you go deeper? Again, this is a very high level overview of the facts. I know a lot of information, but also wanted to give you guys some additional sources to be able to go first. I'm happy to talk through this at any time in detail with anybody in the room or really anybody that you know. Again, I'm super passionate about these facts. So let me know if you want to dive deeper on it. I'm happy to do that. But also built a website, www.resurrectionfacts.com. You can get to it from that QR code. It's got everything from AI generated podcast style summaries of the data I just walked through that make it really easy to consume or on the go. Also built some apps that help folks to learn the facts, and then you can actually test and quiz yourself on the knowledge. And feel free to share this as you get into these conversations with anybody who may be a skeptic, or just give them the website and they can dive deeper on their own too. It's open to everybody. And also on the site, I've also got a bunch of books listed from Dr. Habermas's Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, which I'd highly recommend, goes into great detail on all the facts and objections that I outlined here, but also links to all the source materials. Depending on how deep somebody wants to go, they can get directly to the Josephus or the Tacitus or any of those deeper sources that I outlined in the presentation. So I appreciate you guys letting me come and speak to you today. Again, he's risen indeed. And we just need to arm ourselves with this information that we can share with skeptics and keep our young adults inside the church as they move on to this next phase. So I appreciate it, guys. Thank you, and God bless.